So you or me, Tom?
Uh, I'm fine either way. If you want to go first, you're probably more prepared because you just gave us the whole synopsis.
No, mine is literally like wires around here because I have it all taken apart. But I'll give an overview.
Okay.
All right, we are live. Welcome everybody, or anyone viewing this later, to the Nerves Remote Meetup November 2018 edition. On the call tonight, I'm Michael Reese, living in Utah and buying too many new pieces of hardware every week. And also on the call, we have John Karstens calling in from Idaho, and Todd Resedek calling in from Denver. And we're going to go around the horn real quick for intros. We're going to each kind of share. I think all of us have been on the calls before, so we're actually, instead of doing like personal intros, we're going to do project intros. And we will start with John. You ready to go?
Yeah. I'm John Karstens. I currently live in Idaho Falls and have spent way too much money on my nerves hobby. So lots of fun things, lots of like half-started projects that just have gone with cool ideas, and I bounce between them until I find one where I can move a little bit more forward on faster. But that's about it for me.
You want to show your project?
Oh yeah, I thought we were doing intros, but I will do the project too. So one of my latest ones has been, I've got a raising desk, and it has this controller, and I have it all taken apart, but it usually looks fancy like this. But anyway, this controller has these buttons to raise and lower, and you can see a digital output. I'm on the spot presenting this, so if you can't tell, sorry. But anyway,
Looks awesome.
One day I thought, I bet I could control that. And I took this thing apart, and I noticed that there's just this array of wires. There's even some starting points on the back of this where it says 5-volt and ground. And I basically took a multimeter and I just started checking wires to make sure it actually is. With no fear of frying a Raspberry Pi, I just started plugging wires in and seeing what I would see, what message I would see while connected to the ground. And that led me to, here, I'll put this little crazy hat, to easily discover these two. There's a series of wires on here. This doesn't make any sense, but one of these will actually raise the desk. And then the other one will actually just lower. So all it is a high and a low signal. So that was actually really easy to do. You could just put them on GPIO pins. This is only 5 volts, so it's already geared and ready. And that's all I did, is put it on GPIO, and I could turn it high or low with Elixir AL or Circuits GPIO. But there's also that digital output, which I really wanted, because why raise the desk with nerves if you don't know how tall it is? And down the line, I found 2 wires that are actually, there are 2 that are for like controlling or manipulating the memory module. So there's actually 4 different buttons, and each of those buttons sends a slightly different frequency, or frequency rate. And that just tells it which memory to pick off of. And then the 2 wires like are how you can manipulate it. Like you hold one for a certain amount of time, and then you're in this mode to set number 1 to a certain height, or to basically go through the controller. I didn't really care about that. But then I found these other 2, which are labeled, what were they? R and T. So I thought maybe they're UART. And where's my fancy? Sorry, I've got wires and junk all over. I have this little, this is a Adafruit CP2104, which is, it's not FTDI. I thought it was, but it's a friend of FTDI. and it basically just does the UART signals. But I could actually plug this in and put it on my machine, and I was getting messages through, like in a screen session or something like that. But they were just kind of garbled, misencoded bits and bytes, and you really couldn't get anything out of it. The approach of baud rates, like starting really high, starting really low, just kind of guessing and randomly. And after a while, that I just gave up and started asking questions, and ended up getting told that a logic analyzer would help you determine what those messages are actually, like if they're UART or I2C or SPI. And so because I splurge, I actually bought the logic analyzer, but I just got it today. That's all I have. I haven't actually determined what those wires are because I don't even know what I'm doing with it, but I'll figure it out. So to be continued if I get the actual current height of my desk in my little nurse controller.
That's a golf clap for that. John Karstens is my spirit animal because that is like very similar to a lot of my projects, except John seems to always be like just 1 or 2 steps further down the road than me on all of the nerves related things that I'm thinking about these days. So many thanks for the intro, and I look forward to hearing. Actually, if you get the logic analyzer, like you figure that out, I would love to see like a demo on here's how I tried to reverse engineer it and figure out what the messages were. So looking forward to hear about that in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to see a website we could hit. It's like, how high is John's desk?
Okay.
See a real-time analysis of how high your desk is, or median height for the week, stuff like that.
95th percentile. You should actually hook it up to like a Twitch stream and do Twitch sets John's desk height.
All right, that's coming for next time, if not before.
All right, Todd, do you want to share a demo or a project you're working on?
Sure. It's far less ambitious, I think, than John's, but it's something I've been wanting to build for a while, and it is a little trinket for my desk, and hopefully it shows up on camera okay. I think this glowing light is very hard. Boy, you can't really see that much at all, huh? I'll show you some photos. Let me share some photos.
That's probably the hardest part of these meetups. This is like we have to show physical hardware on kind of weird camera connections.
Yeah, those NeoPixels are really bright too.
Yeah.
Like I normally have hooked them up to 3.3 volts before, and they were still bright. And somebody, maybe even Frank or Connor, was telling me like, oh, if you hook it up to 5 volt, it's really, really bright. And they were right about that. So can you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay. So here are some photos that I took of the work in progress. Maybe I'll start from the back. So also my camera makes it very hard to, like the shutter isn't fast enough to show these dots, but this is an 8x8 matrix, NeoPixel matrix. And those green dots, and there's some light green dots and some white dots, and that is my GitHub contributions like chart, basically out in LEDs. So it's the last 8 weeks, the bottom row. So it's an 8x8 grid. So since there's only 7 days in a week, the bottom row, you can't see it. It's not lit up. So there's 8 rows by 7 of different color shades of green, based just like the GitHub page shows you for your contributions. And so that is a real-time deal. Well, it updates every night at midnight for the day previous. But let me see if I can exit out of here and show some more photos. So here are some work in progress photos. So it is built out of American walnut, and it's sort of like this faceted shape, like a bunch of different facets. And And so you can see like there's 3 holes in the back so that heat can escape because it is totally sealed with a piece of Lexan in the front and Lexan and Gorilla Glue. So there's no airflow in the front of it where the LEDs are. And so those holes are in the back. So you can see here the matrix is mounted, and behind that, this is all routed out, behind that is a Raspberry Pi Zero. And for the power, I'm using, I'm just using one 5-volt like wall wart power supply. So I use 2 USB connectors, or I split the wires basically. So one of these sets of wires goes to the NeoPixels, and the other one, like they're all spliced together. And top tip here is I always use a Sharpie, a red Sharpie on the one USB that accepts power, because there's 2 USBs on these Pi Zeros, and one of them you can use for power and the other one you can't. So usually the first thing I do is color in that one with red so I know which one to deal with. Also, since this is hermetically sealed now, I'll never be able to pull the card out of it. So this was my first NERVS project where I'm using SSH to update. And so that was a fun learning experience. Let's see. Here's a picture, another picture of the shell. And let me see if I can get some that are a little bit more complete. There it is, lit up. I think you could see the LEDs a little bit better that way.
That looks so good.
Thanks. Oh, and there it is with the Lexan on it. I guess it's very hard to tell what colors are what. But, I've got some more official photos. So there's a 3/4. There's a side shot. Another 3/4, reverse. And the bottom, just so you can get some kind of an idea what the shape of it is. And the top. I think that's about it. Yeah, otherwise, like programming-wise, the code of it, which I think is, for a lot of NERVS projects, it's just Elixir code. So it's just basically hitting the GitHub API to get this data. And it comes through in this huge JSON payload, and it's just a matter of filtering out the stuff that I wanted. And a couple of, boy, I'll make this a little bigger just for fun. So like, here's my data store, which is just a gen server that starts or maintains the state. So when it first turns on, when you first plug it in, it has to go back and get 56 days worth of data. So it takes about 2.5 minutes for it to initialize. But every other day after that, it just pushes the state, sort of like a FIFO list. So it'll push the 56th day out and only needs to go back in the GitHub API and for the last 1 day. And let's see if there's anything else that's interesting in here. Yeah, otherwise just the gen server that runs once a day to get the state. So it looks for the if the current state is empty, so that's like its initialized state, it'll go out and initialize data. That's the one that gets all 8 weeks. And then otherwise, if the current hour is 0, so we're at midnight local time, then it runs this update data, and that's the one that just gets the previous day's GitHub contributions. So yeah, I think that's about it, unless you guys have questions.
I mean, my first question is just, do you do a lot of other woodworking? Do you have like a lot of the tools for that hanging around, or? Yeah.
If you want to talk about expensive hobbies. So yeah, I've got a workshop at my house, so many thousands.
Really, Justin is trying to get on, but it's giving him an error. Can you? I was slacking you his email address. If you want to try to add him or invite him. But yes,
I was thinking an invite.
I was thinking the same thing. because I've gotten into woodworking the last 3 years. That's another. And walnut is hard wood, so carving out those little notches all over the place, like I bet that was an adventure.
Yeah, I have a trim router that I bought just this last year because I've had like a big 1/4 inch router or a 1/2 inch router. And this little 1/4 inch rigid router I bought is paid dividends. It's very easy to work with, so came out quick. Hi, Justin. I just showed my piece de resistance and you missed it, man.
I was trying to join the call.
All right. So, but yeah, it's a fun little project. It's just a little, man, now I feel bad. I'm going to unplug it so I can show it to Justin without all these lights. But it's a little walnut faceted desk toy with a NeoPixel matrix in it, and it shows my GitHub contributions for the last 8 weeks. But I can't show you lit up because it just turns into a strobe light, as you know. But so yeah, that's what I've been working on. Just a little bit of woodworking and a little bit of programming and a little bit of hardware. So it was a fun project.
It's awesome. Yeah, when you have the NeoPixel matrix, does it let you set the intensity?
Yeah.
When you're rendering to it?
Yeah, I played around with it a little bit, and I just couldn't. I tried to find a happy place where the different shades of green were like where you could tell the difference. Because if you turn it down, when I turned the intensity down too low, it was just they were all too dim to tell the differences between the greens. And now it's really hard to tell on camera. In real life, it's not quite so bright, but this piece of Lexan, I got some of that spray frosted, like you use to frost glass, and I just like put a ton of coats on there to make it as opaque as I possibly could.
Okay. So. Just so that's not such like a single point of light, basically.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a bunch of dots as much as I wanted it to kind of like flood. And part of that is the distance it is behind the Lexan. But I kind of wanted it to look like the squares do on the GitHub page, like where the edges all kind of bleed into each other. So
yeah, that's a pretty cool project.
Thanks.
Justin, we're glad that you were able to jump on. I know you were just driving recently, and we're super glad you can make time to jump in and be part of the group.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm actually out spending some time in California to be able to do some things for work. It's great to be able to jump in on this stuff and see some of the stuff that people are building.
Sweet. Well, is there anything that you want to share, or should we just keep going with other projects?
Sure. Let me get my bag. I've got some projects in there. But if somebody else wants to jump in first while I go grab that would work out.
Yeah, I can go ahead and I'll just show kind of my latest thing that I was working on. So I'm actually going to start with, I'll try to do the demo. I think this is not too bright. So my goal here is I wanted to go into I have a 7-year-old son, and I wanted to go into his 1st grade class or his 2nd grade class. Geez, I shouldn't say that in front of him. And I wanted just to I was trying to share something about software, what it's like to write software, but I wanted it to have some real world presence. So I put together this little thing. And I'm also using NeoPixels. They're normally a strand, but I've arrayed them kind of as a matrix. And so I just, it does a few different animations, like kind of a scrolling one and an oscillating one. And it has these little push buttons that will change the color. And that way the kids could all, I'll actually lift this up a little bit. You can see I put all of this kind of inside of a plastic container. So just so that the kids can come up and they can push the buttons, and then we play this little game where the kids wrote a program, but instead of it being a computer program, it was a kid program. So they basically gave each other instructions about how to carry these balls across the room, and so they had to solve a logic puzzle by programming each other. And so it turned out to be a ton of fun, and along the way it was good to have my first experience hooking up a button to a project, hooking up RGB LEDs, and just kind of working through some of those details. But ultimately, the most fun thing was just seeing a whole bunch of 7-year-olds like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And then one of them's like, my dad has a Raspberry Pi. He says that I can have it. And, you know, they're all just geeking out about software. And I'm like, man, I wish the world was this cool when I was 7 years old. But I'm glad that these kids are going to, you know, they're going to grow up and build all sorts of cool and amazing things. And my 7-year-old, he already thinks that, like, the other day he was like, Dad, can we get a remote control impact hammer? And I had to like go Google what an impact hammer was, but it's basically a specialized piece of like just demolition equipment. And I looked at it and I'm like, nobody makes one, Banks. And he's like, Dad, just build me one. and I realized that he thinks I can literally just like build anything. He needs to get some concept of how much time it takes, but like that's a pretty good starting point if he just thinks that he can build a remote control whatever whenever he decides to do it, right? So anyway, super stoked for future generations of nerves builders and hardware builders and software builders.
That's cool. There looked like there was like a little 7-segment LCD in there. What was that?
Yeah, here, I'll hold up the camera. I can't take the top totally off, but basically I actually went way back and used one of my old Raspberry Pi A Pluses and saw there's a LiPo battery, and that little 7-segment display is just a level converter. So it just shifts it down to 5-volt power. And I'm using that to power the whole thing just so I can carry it around. And I didn't have to worry about, if there's a USB output somewhere or if it was going to supply a full 2 amps or whatever. So portable power source, but it just shows how much voltage the battery is at. So I have some idea of if it's about to die.
Cool.
Yeah. So Justin, do you want to show off one of your projects?
Sure. I don't know if I can power it on completely, but I can talk about some of the things that I've been working on lately and some of the joys that I've been having with dealing with some pieces of hardware. And so I've been playing a lot lately with some Raspberry Pi Zeros, and one of which is something that Frank may have shown off before as well, because he's been pushing this project forward. But that is this little I2C chip that we have soldered onto the back of this Raspberry Pi. And what that is the ATECC508A crypto chip. And we're using these to be able to do hardened security for Nerves Hub devices. So the idea is this is an HSM, what's known as an HSM. It's a hardware security module. And so public, or I should say private keys that you would use to be able to connect to secure services like Nerves Hub and AWS, IoT, the Azure services, they can all get derived from this HSM here. And then the private information never leaves this chip. So that like makes it so that nobody ever knows that information. It's really, 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 really difficult to be able to actually get at it. I actually think that they protect it so much that they say that they can't. But it's been fun to work on the project with Frank on trying to be able to get more first-class support for that, especially because Frank's been working lately on the Elixir Circuits project, which is sort of the Elixir Ale 2.0 in a sense. That's all been rewritten into NIFs, and one of which is the I2C circuits protocol, which allows us to be able to do that. And that kind of sparked like a whole new interest for me in dealing with writing and like creating the abstractions for what would be like components, like I2C based components, because we have this Elixir Circuits project now, which has I2C and SPI and GPIO, and those are like protocols. And then we can take those protocols and we can model components, like, for example, that crypto chip. It's a component, and then you put it on a board. Now you have a board, and that kind of like it kind of like made me spiral out of control slightly to where I just went nuts and started like getting a whole bunch of different boards with lots of components on them, one of which is the Envira hat, which the P hat, or as I like to call them, the Fats. This thing's pretty neat. It's from Pimeroni. It's got a motion sensor on it, some light colors, a barometer, temperature sensor, some analog inputs. And these are all like a collection of I2C and SPI devices. And I've really been enjoying the way that we model things in Elixir, to where we have components that live on a board, and then eventually we can have libraries that are like the EnviroHat board, which is just a collection of other dependencies that are these components. And then the last thing I have here, which is sort of something that I'm really enjoying to show off. We're going to be kicking off a new training series next year, starting officially currently with the with Lone Star Elixir. And this is the new training kit that we have. It's Raspberry Pi Zero on the back, with the Pimeroni LED shim on the top, which is an I2C based device that has 28 RGB neopixels and a 28 by 1 matrix. And on the front here we have the Adafruit OLED bonnet, which has a 4-way joystick with a press down button and 2 buttons, 128 by 64 character monochrome display. And what we're going to be doing with this during the training is we're going to be using Schneck to render a game to the display, and we're going to also use the LED shim as like a sort of a power up sort of bar to enhance the gameplay, the controller functions, and the buttons. We're essentially going to be trying to do, I think the current goal is to be able to do a Space Commander game, and then during the training we're gonna take all these devices, we're gonna connect them and manage them using NervShub, and we're going to build a custom Phoenix backend game server to do matchmaking and drive the actual like interactive multiplayer gameplay, and learn all about how to be able to basically create like full IoT hardware platform systems using Nerves and NervShub and Phoenix and all of these other great dependencies that we have available to us. So that's basically what I've got. We're working really hard on getting this thing off the ground. Tentative, we might do it in LA as well early, but we don't know yet. So there's a bunch of different places that we're going to be doing these training courses next year. And if you want more information about it, absolutely, feel free to talk about it on the channel and hit us up directly. So.
Justin,
awesome.
You are ruining my budget.
The project funds for this kit is like we're keeping it low. This is only like $50 for this whole thing, basically. So
holy cow! This is blowing my mind so much. We were all just talking before the call started, before we turned the call live. We were all talking about how we really all want to get down to Lone Star this year. And I was like debating with myself, like, oh, if I go down, should I go down for the training as well, or just the conference? Like a lot of times I just go because I just want to see people and have a chance to catch up with friends and stuff like that. But yeah, that would actually be super fun. And so you guys think you can fit building the game and the game server and matchmaking all in a single training?
Yeah, and it's going to be a little bit of challenge to it, but we're going to try to I don't know if everybody's familiar with the how to draw a horse meme, where it's essentially like you crudely draw like a stick figure horse in the beginning, and then the last step is you add some details, and the final product is like this beautiful horse drawing. Yeah. Some of it might be like that. I don't like to try to like do the as I would call it, the cooking show way of training too much, because that's like, it's kind of like cheating a little bit, but we're going to try to be able to pack as much knowledge into it as possible, and I think that we'll be able to cover it. It might get tight, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to get it covered, so ears open. I'm running a beta class right now, and it's working out.
That's seriously insane that you can get that much stuff done. Like if you were doing this with, I don't know, like if you're trying to do it with basically any other platform that I'm aware of, that you're trying to build a game and a game server, I mean, it would take, I don't know, man years worth of time to get something like that running, and it's insane.
Yeah, so the idea, the whole like concept, I guess, behind the course is going to be almost as if you would be able to say, like, you can do mix new, right, for new mix projects, right? And I really hate to keep using like IoT, but because it's got that stigma around it. But it's almost like you could say like mix new IoT, and it would lay out a Nerves project application, some library code. It would include Nerves Hub stuff, and it would do a Phoenix app for you. Because when people go to build products using Nerves, it's inevitable that you're going to have some sort of custom backend to be able to handle the custom functionality that your application holds. If you think about like building like a smart scale or something, you can manage your firmware using Nerves Hub. That's like why we're trying to be able to build that platform as an enhanced offering, like for Nerves and devices, to be able to make it even more palatable to come to use this language. But Nerves Hub doesn't care about stuff like how much your users weigh, but that's something that your business domain cares about heavily. And so but Nerves Hub, your Nerves devices will connect to Nerves Hub and use Nerves Hub as this like single source of truth for like devices and the authorization of those devices to be able to perform actions in your ecosystem. And so since you already have that as a mechanism, it makes sense to be able to extend it and use it. And so we're going to be teaching this way of doing delegated authorization or authentication for your devices to your own custom backend through Nerves Hub in like a plug fashion. So you can almost just like I'm trying to say, like, mix new IoT platform, and it'll all sort of just be laid out, linked together, and ready for you to just deploy. It's like you'll have an app that can talk to Nerves Hub, get deployed by Nerves Hub, and you'll have a Phoenix backend that you can just put somewhere and use Phoenix channels and delegated Nerves Hub auth to make all your stuff just work. So we're going to hope to wrap up a lot of that into that sort of like scaffolding to make it easier for us and quicker for us to be able to get through the training courses. Much like how the -- init gadget flag came about, where we're like, oh my god, it's so great.
Yeah.
Like getting a Pi Zero off the ground these days for testing for me is just amazing.
Yeah, we actually talked about that on one of our previous months. Like it's insane to me that we can like basically mix nerves.new, and you have SSH keys, like you can get to it remotely, you can push images remotely, like that whole development environment, having a high level language on a decent device that is up and running in a matter of minutes and that you can push updates to and stuff is like, I mean, that's an amazing starting point for a project. And it sounds like if you guys are continuing to push the boundaries on that, it's just gonna.
Yeah. Slight spoiler, I don't have anything to show officially yet for this, but if we're doing this again in another month, I will. But I've secretly been working on, not secretly, I've been talking about it publicly for a while now, actually. But there's a Nerves Sync project that I'm running behind the scenes that is like a Phoenix code reloader, but on steroids. The goal of it is to be able to make it so that you can fire up a server instance on your laptop, connect it, and point it to a remote target like your Raspberry Pi Zero, and you'll never have to shut down the server to the point where it'll recompile. It'll be a live compiler essentially, and it's even intelligent enough at this point to be able to notice that when you add or remove dependencies from your mix file, to be able to compile those code modules and sync them partially over the wire to the device, and then have the device add them to its own code server without having to take the device down. So it's the new like layer of the the Nerves Reloader stuff that we've been working on. It's been taking us a long time to be able to get this out because it continually needs new additions to Elixir. And the last PR that I had open to be able to support it just landed. So when Elixir 1.8 comes out, we'll finally have support for it to be able to work. But the next meetup that we do for this, I would love to attend it and show some of that work as well, because it's pretty neat to watch.
So
Yeah.
it's funny you bring that up because the last 2 or 3 days in the Nerves chat, the Nerves channel, has been so much about that. Like a lot of people, how do I reload? I don't want to restart the device. How can I just push and hot reload code?
Yeah, the problem I'm hung up on right now is that I originally modeled it using distributed Erlang and the RPC stuff. But distributed Erlang and RPC is not conducive towards sending large amounts of data across it, even when you chunk it across the wire. And so I'm trying to be able to pluck that out and make it and put in a better backend. And so I'm trying to be able to use the same sort of SSH stuff that we've been doing with the SFTP and in a gadget. But it's it's a pet project since I have to still get Nerves Hub working out into the public before that Lone Star training happens.
I think you might be the person on the call that has the biggest problem with starting a lot of projects, it sounds like. I'm for one grateful for your obsession with starting new projects as the beneficiary of several of them.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy. It's just nice to be able to see people use the stuff yeah, I mean, just to see stuff work.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned that the Nerves Hub training, that game is going to be using the Scenic library. And I've seen, it seems like when Boyd kind of unveiled that finally at ElixirConf, like it's just been blowing up since then. So like, how is that? How have you seen that like changing the Nerves community? Because I've seen like Connor doing a lot of stuff with it. I've seen Amos King doing some stuff with it. It seems like, and now you're saying the training is going to do stuff with Scenic. So like, is this a big milestone, do you think, for like the UI part of Nerves?
I think so. I talked about this a little bit in at the Big Elixir recently, and sort of some of the story about how we use it, how we're using things at Latote. At Latote, we started out completely as writing an app that, since we sponsor the kiosk projects, right? It's basically like a nerve system that runs Chrome in the back, and we did that because we have a lot of web developers that we could leverage to be able to get user interfaces off the ground quickly, and also because we wanted to be able to just have these sort of kiosk devices point to a remote service to make it easier for us to be able to manage the content, quote, on them, even though it's just pointing to some remote service. And it was because like back then we didn't really have a convenient way of being able to deploy stuff to the devices, and furthermore, I mean, like we all know working with hardware, like it's you get that satisfaction loop a little bit slower than you do just working with software on a computer. It takes a little bit longer, and some people, and because of that, like it just feels a little bit more abstracted. And so we took the shorter routes on being able to load web interfaces at first, but now once all of our devices got online on Nerves Hub, and I pushed my first bit of firmware through that mechanism, and every device that was in our warehouse was updated in like less than a minute, because AWS is like so fast. We started to realize that we weren't constrained by these constraints that we had, like the things that we had in place before. So we sort of started to rethink some of the ways that we were using these heavy front ends, and so that drove our decisions more towards like putting firmware on the devices that was like full service and didn't have to reach out remotely except to maybe like post some like finalized data or to get some information, because it had these extra benefits. Like it didn't weigh as much because we could use like Scenic on the front end as for one, and in addition we could target individual workstations as like testing stations, where we couldn't really do that in a very convenient way with the application just loading this remote content, right? It's like very difficult to be able to say, oh, I know you're different than somebody else, when even though you're all loading the same web page. It's like it added a lot of convolution in the back end and the code that made it really muddy. And so it like opened up this whole new perspective for us to be able to say like, oh yeah, maybe we don't need to like point to a central server. We can actually like get away with writing full-fledged, fully serviced firmware onto these devices. And it made and Scenic especially made it more palatable for us to be able to write these more simple interfaces. And so yeah, I think that the Erlang and Elixir absolutely needed something to come along that was better than Wix widgets, because that was not working, and it's not cross compilable. They say it's just you can't cross compile it. To be able to use for user interfaces other than just being stuck with having to run like full on web stacks. And for me, it's changed the way that I've done things in my house, because I've always wanted to be able to install Nerves devices, and I'm not a web programmer. And so when it comes time to like write a simple interface for this cool thing that I wanted to integrate in my house, it would take me forever to do it. And I would get bored and I would push it off. And then I'd have this Raspberry Pi with a beautiful display on it that would just be showing like an IEX console. And so I think that it really fills in it fills in like a really like needed area that we had. It's and to see like the kind of stuff that you can produce now, it looks like a polished package. Like everything's starting to really come together and provide this like full-on ecosystem to help us all build things without having to learn, like without having to eat the elephant. Because web programming, come on, it's like it's massive, man. Hopefully I answered your question there. I kind of went on a tangent. But,
no, that's cool. Yeah, I think you answered it well. We're all a bunch of web programmers here, except for you, I guess. So
yeah.
For us, making a little light blink is like super exciting, because none of us, we've talked about this before, have any background in electrical engineering at all. So for us,
I don't either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I don't either. I'm my whole thing started out with one day I decided I wanted to start my motorcycle for my phone, and that project taught me that it was really hard to do that. And so I worked on trying to be able to make it easier for everyone. And all these things fell together. I came together with Frank and some others, and we all just kind of had the same sort of vision in mind. And yeah, it's wild to be able to see how far I've been able to go without having any electrical engineering background. So I did a lot of middleware and like mobile programming, but not really web programming. And so for me, like a user interface tool was, it's just really nice. It feels really nice to be able to work with Scenic, than having to like deal with CSS. So.
Yeah, I think that's super cool, and I'm really glad that we basically have this really good alternative now, because so this group kind of started our first project that we were all, for a while, all of us were just building the same project because none of us had any idea, or at least I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I know a few other people didn't, but we all wanted to build sprinkler controllers for our houses or wherever we lived, right? And honestly, for me at the time, I was like, the easiest way for me to get a UI on this thing is to connect to a Phoenix backend and deploy a Phoenix backend somewhere and then load that on my phone. That was the easiest way for me to get a UI to like what was happening with my sprinklers and being able to control my sprinklers. But like I did have to solve all of the authorization problems and everything else that comes with like, this is now a public thing. And so I remember as we were all talking about it, like, man, if Scenic was out, maybe we could just like put a display right on the thing and that would be it. And then you can see what's going on. You can control it. And I mean, you don't really want to control your sprinklers from your phone all that often. And so, yeah, so I think it's great to have like a really strong, and knowing Boyd's background, like he clearly knows what he's doing with, with graphic stacks and things like that, and keeping it lightweight, but also making it, it's like an expressive thing. I was working with someone posted a blog post about building the Snake game in Schneck. If anyone hasn't done that, I highly recommend finding that blog post and just walk through it. Like, it took me an hour, 2 hours, something like that. And I had a working game of Snake running on my laptop and like with no magic, right? But it's like amazing. I was like, you could build all sorts of fun sort of pixely styled games just with this tool set. And then you could easily hook it up and make it multiplayer. Like, that would be trivially simple to do. And so, yeah, anyway, I'm super excited about it. I think it does fill a really interesting niche, right? It makes a whole bunch of new product ideas or hobby ideas more feasible.
Yeah. What I really like about it is I've tried for years to continually automate my house for no reason except that I want to, and I think it's cool. But so it's been really exciting to like feel. I think what Nerves has done is helped me be unafraid of the hardware layer, right? Because as a web guy, as a server side guy, the hardware was always like a scary feature. And so now I'm like way too far in the weeds everywhere of all these little side projects I want around my house that are just fun to do. So it makes it a lot easier. And then with Schneck, because I'm putting on these little Raspberry Pi modules, I'm actually like halfway there to where I can plug in a USB from another Pi connected to a screen and get that some buttons, some interface buttons. Turn this on, get some IEX, get some logs, and I think that would be nice. But then I also like what you're talking about I just spaced. So what I'm finding is like making all these cool little devices, but it would be really nice to get them connected with already existing home services like Alexa and Google Home. So that's also my super ambitious goal, is to make it even easier to not only build your little devices, but have it connected to your system. Like Justin saying, you've always got to do a custom backend, but it would be nice to easily tie that to existing services and like interact with the Nerves device with my voice. Super excited about that. We'll see if I ever get there.
Yeah, well, there's one other thing where I think we're getting close to time here. I don't want to keep everyone super late, but one other shout out I would really like to just say, anyone watching this later, tonight's call has been a whole lot of like, here's this project that, John already had to learn about 6 different other small things to get to where he is in his project. Justin is obviously years into his journey from trying to start a bike to, hardware security modules. So tonight was a lot of intermediate to advanced topics in Nerves. I think part of the purpose of this group is just to like share what we're learning, and regardless of what the level is, just be excited for what we're all building and able to do. But another part of our purpose is to try to help other people realize that the hardware is not scary, that starting a project is easy. So if there's anyone who feels like they are a Nerves newbie, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a Twitter handle, Nerves Meetup. You can tweet at that. You can jump into we'll invite you to the Elixir Slack. And you can come chat with us and talk about what you're building. And we'd love if you could come share your first build, the first project that you got up and running off the ground. We'd love for you to give us a demo or to share kind of your experience of getting it all running, because we want to continue to help new people come into this hobby, or if you're doing it as a hobby. And we were also talking earlier tonight, just before we started recording, about how there's Nerves jobs that are starting to show up more and more. And that makes me thrilled, right? Like maybe a lot of these hobbies turn into real products, either things that we're going to invent or companies that we join. And, I think we'll eat a whole bunch of other firmware platforms lunches because this platform is just pretty insane for how quickly you could get a product really production ready. So please reach out if you feel like a Nerves newbie. or if you have topics that you're interested in, let us know. Tweet at us, and we'll try and touch on those. For John, Todd, Justin, any of you guys have final thoughts that you wanna wrap up with?
I'll be at the Nerves Hub training, and I'm working hard on getting these two guys to also come down there with me. So we'll see. Hopefully you guys are more excited about it now than you were an hour ago.
Yeah, I will accept donations to help me get down there. Just saying.
The Nerves Remote Meetup actually just becomes a GoFundMe
Yeah.
to get all of us down to Austin, Texas.
To go to trainings, and then I will talk about it for you. No, still waiting to see if maybe they accept the talk that I propose. That'd get me down there.
Sweet. All right. Well, I will be looking into getting to Austin. And thanks, Justin, for making the time and helping give us some of the updates on what's going on with the Nerves team itself and the projects you guys have in the works. Sounds like we touched on at least 3 pretty big projects. So I don't know how you guys are getting that all done, but we're grateful, and hopefully a bunch more people are interested in that Nerves training and boning up on some of those skills themselves.
Yeah, thanks everyone here and everyone listening. And
we'll invite you back next month. So if you have any updates, anytime you want to jump on, I guess we'll grant friend of the show status here, and you can always jump in and share what's going on with the Nerves team.
Great, thanks.
All right. Well, good night, everybody, and we'll see all of you guys in roughly a month.